Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Simon from Hong Kong, and welcome to Andy's Licorice Chat. Oh, Andy's Licorice Talk. How do you like that? Please remember to like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And one bit of advice that I've been offering everyone, as I do it myself, I would love for you to go back and listen to these chats with pen and paper or your iPhone or whatever you take notes and take some notes. You'd be amazed. And you can go back on our channel and see a choice of anybody you want. And you'd be amazed with how educational and profound a lot of their statements are. And it's a wonderful reminder. This is our 16th episode. And it's the first one that our dear friend Lorenzo is not here. He's feeling a little under the weather. He's participating, as he puts it, he's working remotely from home this time. And while I'm the person you see most of the time, he's definitely the heart and soul of this project. The whole thing was his idea. He makes the posters. He's on the board. He makes all the big decisions. And he helps our guests and me with all the techie stuff. So I'd like to just introduce Lorenzo from an hour away from me.
Hello. Hello, good evening.
You're not supposed to have a better view than me. It's making me look bad, you know? You have a nice view there in the background there.
So,
thank you, Lorenzo, for all you do. And hopefully next week you'll be back here to hold my hand and I won't be so nervous.
Okay. Good luck.
All right.
Good luck.
So it's time to introduce our very special guest. And there's been a tremendous excitement, of course, responding to the advertisements of having him here. So I'd like to introduce Richard Stoltzman.
Bum, bum, bum.
Very, very good. Very good. How are you?
I had a lot of time to think about that during your talk. So,
well, you made very good use of it. It was a big success.
Yeah.
So usually I talk about how I know the guest. In this man's case, it's very difficult because he's in that sweet spot of that era when I was pretty much starting the clarinet, and he was the guy doing it, so to speak. So I mean, I listened to all his records, and I went to all his recitals in New York at the 92nd Street Y, saw his clarinet quintet performances there, and most recently, he's been to Hong Kong several times, and most recently, the tables were reversed about 6 years ago. We did a Wagner Siegfried Idyll with the orchestra with Lauren Mazel conducting just before he died, a few months before he died. And those of you probably know it was written by Wagner for a woman, and it was supposed to be on the stairwell. So we did it in the lobby of the Cultural Center. And who's sitting there waving at me right in front of the Starbucks? But Dick Stoltzman, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, is my read okay? Did I put it on? And it was a perfect lesson on, you never know who's going to be there, and always have a read and always be prepared. But probably the most memorable moment was his Carnegie Hall concert, Dick, right? And this was the first clarinet recital in the history of the big hall. And Benny Goodman was in the audience, as I remember. So if we're talking about records, he was the first clarinetist to give a recital in the big hall, Carnegie Hall, and he was also the first clarinetist to give a recital in the Hollywood Bowl, which has a seating capacity of over 17,000 people. So my first question to you is, are these still records? I've never heard of another clarinetist actually doing that. Do you know of any?
My first answer to you is no.
Wow.
No, meaning there haven't been any others, and no, I never heard of any.
Right.
A manager tells me that I should always say, still the only clarinet player to play Carnegie Hall and the Hollywood Bowl. But
yeah, well, that's a huge achievement. Is these decades long. I remember it was like a clarinet convention at Carnegie Hall. I mean, you'd run into people that you hadn't seen in years, and a lot of them weren't even serious clarinetists. It was just an event it was a historical event, and everyone went. Did you start with the Debussy Premier Rhapsody? That's what I remember in my mind. 30 odd years later.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, I don't really remember, but I remember the theme was music written for clarinetists, great clarinetists, and Mimar was one of the great clarinet players, and so yeah, my mind's a little bit. The thing that I remember about that Carnegie Hall concert was, well, of course, that Benny Goodman was in the audience, which was amazing, and that at intermission, my manager was backstage and informed me that he was in the audience, which I didn't know until then.
Really?
Yes, he's in the second tier. He's on second tier, Dick. He's in the second tier box. It's going to be on stage right. So when you go back on stage for the second half, be sure and introduce him. So, that sort of blew my focus about what I was supposed to be doing on this stage anyway, and the concert I was supposed to be playing. And all I could think about was that I had to introduce Benny Goodman, which I did. And that was great. And he stood up and they had a spotlight on him, and everybody, and me too. I had my clarinet, and I'm Andy, you're a clarinet player, right?
It depends who you ask.
I'll ask you. When you go like this, what happens to your clarinet?
It's not good for the reed.
Well, below the reed, on the barrel plate. What happens, I'll tell you, is that gravity takes over and the clarinet falls apart. And that's what happened at Carnegie Hall. My introduction to Benny Goodman resulted in my clarinet falling off onto the ground, and Carnegie Hall has a kind of a slant to it towards the audience, and started rolling, half of it.
Wow.
Should I go on, or you?
No, that's okay. Thankfully, I don't remember all that. But
there you go. That's my point. That's my point. I was in shock, and I thought, this is the end of the world for me. And of course, my pianist, dear Irma Villaseal, was also basically in shock too. And I had tails on, and I sort of like Groucho Marx, sort of ran it down, pulled it back, put it on. Irma said, "Can you play it?" I said, "I don't know." Here we go. And I did. So we played the rest of the concert. Afterwards, I wanted to, just get the reaction of the people who came back to say hi about that incident. And just what you said was completely universally true. They said, What are you talking about? I don't know. I was looking at Benny, and I said, aha. You can do such, when you have a personality like Benny in the audience, you can drop your clarinet. You probably drop your trousers if you want, and nobody's going to notice. And it was fantastic, and it was a good lesson to me.
Well, now he went backstage to talk. I remember on the receiving line. I must have seen him. Did he say anything to you?
Benny, yeah, I mean, I by that time had known Benny a little bit. He'd asked me up to his apartment several times, and had me like try reeds and listen to recording. He had recorded the Rager Quintet, and he was curious to know if I thought that it was up to the standard. And of course, what am I going to say? Yeah, but anyway. The only thing he said, I played the piece that was dedicated to Benny, Mel Powell's piece called, I can't remember, but anyway, something like Benny. And he said, that Mel Powell's piece, you played that awfully fast. But that was it. That was the only thing said. But you know, I took it to heart and played it a little bit slower than from then on. But I was thinking this is something also that's a reality of all performers. I think sometimes that your recollection of the audience, of the tempos of pieces, of the whole scene is yours alone, and everybody else takes their own reality of what's happening. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So anyway, let's go. If you don't mind me taking over a little bit, I'd like to go back in history to way before you were born, and reflect a little bit on the licorice stick.
Very good.
The licorice stick. Why is it called the licorice stick? I hope people are sending in answers to that question because I don't have the answer. But how it affected my life was the junior high school that I went to in San Francisco, James Lick Junior High School, was having an election for the president of the student body for the coming year. And I got it in my head, I think along with my mom, that I should have my clarinet and that I should even play it instead of or in lieu of a speech, which, you know, she was my mom and I did what she told me to. And so we made little 3x5 cards that said, vote for Dick and his licorice stick. And she sewed like a 2-inch little licorice stick pieces on to each 3x5 card. And I stood in the entrance to James Lick Junior High School on the day of the election and handed these out to unsuspecting students. And so I won the election. That's my story about licorice stick. But the licorice stick loomed in my life a lot more because of my grandma taking me to maybe my first movie in a movie house, dark, big screen, and watching the Benny Goodman story.
Yeah.
That is the first time I had seen Benny Goodman. Of course, later on, I found out it wasn't Benny Goodman, it was Steve Allen. But anyway, I saw, and the clarinet, and it was like, you know, big screen. So like 35 feet big clarinet. And it was very impressive and stuck in my mind to the point where I eventually picked one up myself. I picked one up actually from underneath my mom and dad's bed, where my dad kept his clarinet. It was an Albert system clarinet in a nice leather case, very attractive for a little kid who's 4 or 5 to open up and take out the little pieces and roll them. Of course, I didn't know that I was going to be doing the same thing at Carnegie Hall about 20 years later, but at that time, I just used it as toys. And my father came in and caught me doing this, but instead of punishing me, I think it caused him to have a thought about maybe he called me Richie. Maybe Richie should take a lesson on the clarinet. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life in terms of the clarinet, because that's really what I've done. Take lessons, take lessons, take lessons, take lessons, take lessons. And the first teachers for me were actually not even clarinet teachers. They were band directors. And my goal, when I started to have any kind of realization that I should have a future plan, was to be a band director. A junior high school band director actually is what I wanted to be. And I have only the greatest memories of every one of my teachers, but especially my band teachers, because, well, just because they were great. They were working with us students who none of us could play very well at all, me included, but they were tough and benign at the same time, and serious and delightfully funny too at the same time. And they all led their bands with great enthusiasm, and that really stuck in my mind about teaching and about what it represents in life for young people and for adults. And so my goal was eventually that if I studied hard enough and could get into college and everything, I would try to become a junior high school band teacher, band director. But on the way to that, other things, of course, happened. And one of them was that I had some experiences with the clarinet, which were very, in retrospect, enlightening. My dad and mom sang in a choir at the Stewart Memorial United Presbyterian Church on Alvarado Street in San Francisco. And they would occasionally do a little bit of, we talked about this earlier, a little solfege or la 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 la. My dad had a tenor voice, and my mom was an alto. And so I would hear them doing this, and as I got not better on the clarinet, but just able to even hold it, my dad had this brilliant idea, I'm being facetious, it was the idea to bring me to the rehearsal and help out with the alto section. My mom was the alto section. Actually, I think there was another nice lady there too, but that was it. And he was a little bit concerned about the fact that the alto section was not really singing in tune. So he said, bring your clarinet and you can help play along with the alto part. Okay. What do I know? I had at that time it was a metal clarinet because I think my dad thought I should have a clarinet that won't break. And, so he got me a $25 metal clarinet. I had that with me. And so they had their rehearsal Wednesday night, and I had my clarinet. And I, played the, what did I play? First of all, I played the dots on the page. Now, I didn't know yet how to play the clarinet. I mean, I didn't know anything about reading music, but I knew that when the dots go up, you raise your fingers up. Go down, your fingers down. Aha. The other thing I realized was that I wasn't alone. I was with, two ladies who were singing, and I had to listen. So not only did I have to move my fingers up and move them down, but I had to listen. The other fact, which I didn't think about at all, was that I had a B-flat clarinet, and of course the parts were in C, but that didn't make any difference to me because I couldn't read the music anyway. So what I learned from that experience was that you've got to use your ear when you play. Your fingers that's nice, but you've got to use your ear. You've got to hear. You have to listen to everything that's going on to be a musician, And I wasn't a musician that time, but it was one of the things that stuck with me. And the other thing about, I could spend like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks talking about it. But another thing when we're talking about teachers is I was always blessed with great teachers. Every one of my teachers was right for me at the moment. The junior high band teachers, of course, were great, but also my individual teachers. And my dad finally found some sort of bargain rate deal at the Sherman and Clay Music Store in San Francisco, where I could come in with my grandma for half an hour and go to see Mr. Thompson, Howard Thompson. And he was a doubler in the Ice Follies and various other things in San Francisco gigging. And so he had an alto sax and actually I also had a flute and a clarinet. And so I brought my clarinet in to him and he helped me play the instrument. And he was a kindly old man, way, way, way younger than what I am now. But I thought he was an old man. And he opened me up to doing things on the clarinet, playing rhythms, playing with another person himself, duets, and just not really talking about pointing to the music and how you should play the music, but just getting me to wake up to music. And when it turned out I didn't get to become the junior high school president because my dad moved to another city and I went with, I was so sad, mostly because I was not going to see Mr. Thompson again. And my last lesson, I started tearing up and he said, don't do that. Oh, but what did he call me? I think he called me Richard. He said, Richard, don't cry. Don't cry. You're going to find another teacher. And the main thing is that you just, you have it. You have inside of you the music. You just take it with you, and you just stay with that, and your teachers will help you. And so don't cry. You know, and I thought that was so sweet that he said. I didn't think about that at the time. I thought, well, that's no help to me. But at a later date, I started thinking about when I started giving master classes. At the end of my master classes, I would tell the students, and have you thanked your teachers lately? And people would look around like, what? You know, I said, yeah, you know, for me, I'm on stage. When I'm through, bravo, or something like that, I get applause. Have you ever done that to your teacher? Bravo, bravo, great lesson. People just laughed, of course. And it dawned on me that this was an important part of being a student, was being appreciating what you were receiving from your teacher, because your teacher was giving you something very precious. And I'm just going to flash forward to Manhattan when my teacher, Cal Opperman, my last teacher, was having, I think, his 75th birthday at a diner on the West Side, and Skylight Diner. And I got in a taxi and told the driver, do you know the Skylight Diner? It's on the West Side. And he looked around and he said, sure, of course I know that. He had a turban on, you know, or something like that. So he spoke with an accent which anyway. And he said, what are you going down there? I said, I'm going to see my teacher. My teacher is having his 75th birthday. He said, you have a teacher. I thought he meant, you know, like you're too old to have a teacher. He said, you have a teacher. You are very lucky. In my country, the other name for God is teacher. And I got out of the taxi and went into the diner to see my teacher. And we had a bunch of students there. And, you know, he was sort of presiding on a long table in the middle. Somewhat biblically, he was in the middle of this table with his students, disciples all around him. And I thought, I'm coming into the Silver Light Diner to see God. It was a heavy moment for me to think about that and how much the teachers in our lives are responsible as musicians and as leaders to bring you along to whatever ability you can make in your life, and with the clarinet. It was beautiful, and then a flashback to the first time I had my first lesson with Cal, and I remember I just came down there because my teacher at the time, Keith Wilson, who was the teacher at the Yale School of Music, I had asked him about what did he know about reeds, and he said, the reeds, In fact, I remember going to a concert, a dress rehearsal of a concert that he was playing at Yale, and he was so frustrated with his reeds. It was with a string quartet. Brodus Earl was the first violinist, and he had at those times reeds. The Van Dorns were in little boxes, blue boxes of about 20 or something like that, and he reached down and brought this box, and he just leaned over to Brodus Earl and he said, "You pick one." he said, "I'm so frustrated with these reeds." But he had a book, Mr. Wilson did, it was called The Handbook for Making and Adjusting Single Reeds. And it was written by Kalman Opperman. And he pulled this down. He said, "Well, here, take this, read this, this tells about reeds." And I said, I read it a little bit. And the next lesson I had with Mr. Wilson, I said, is Mr. Opperman still alive? And he said, I don't know. It was written in 1950s. And this was, like way in the future. I was having, 1965 lessons. So I wrote down the address, typed letter to Kalman Opperman, and said, "I'm a student at Yale. Do you have the possibility of taking, or do I have the possibility of taking a lesson with you on reed making?" And he typed back a letter, which I got, and he said, "I'm available to see you on Saturday, so and so." So that was it. And so I came down, and we started what turned out to be the rest of my life lessons with Cal. But but that very first lesson, I wanted to just learn how to make reeds, and he knew that. But he said, "Just play something. You should play a little something on a clarinet." Now, I was almost getting my master's degree at Yale, so I was like, hell yes, I played what. So I got out my clarinet and did some stuff. And he said, "Man, you don't even know where the holes are on the clarinet, do you?" This was coming from Kalman Opperman, who didn't have a degree from Yale, didn't have a degree from anything that I knew of. And I just wanted to learn how to make a few reeds. That's what I thought I was supposed to be getting from this teacher, who turned out to be another name for God. And what he had planned for me, and what he he envisioned for me for the next 25 or 30 years, was to become a clarinet player in the highest level of the sense of what it means to make music on the clarinet. But that was a special moment for me. And then when we had his 90th birthday at Carnegie Hall, and the Carnegie Recital Hall, there were a lot of clarinet players there. A lot of clarinet players. One of them was Stanley Drucker, and I remember Cal. I said, "Do you want me to invite anybody, or should we just sell tickets?" And he said, "Well, you just sell tickets." And I said, "Well, I maybe give like Stanley Drucker," and he said, "Nah, he doesn't buy. He has to buy a ticket." So
did you give it? Did he give any free tickets to anybody?
No.
None. Okay.
And also, I had my ideas since I was trying to help get the program happening. What would be it played, and I brought down some ideas to Cal, and he said, "What? No, 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 no. But it's going to be my music. That's it. My music and my students. That's my 90th thing. You know." Whole evening of Kalman Opperman etudes, and of course he had written rather extensively for the clarinet in other ways too, but this was the voice of God here talking. That this is what's going to be on my 90th birthday, or else forget about it.
By the way, did you ever tell him the God story?
No.
No. Interesting.
No, I haven't told anybody but you.
Well, and a few other people now.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I've I've got a pile here of I'm writing a book which is called Another Name for God. So, but anyway, yeah. Okay, I've lost my train of thought.
The Carnegie Recital Hall tribute.
Yeah. And so all of his students came, of course, and he had many of them play. He chose who he wanted to have play. They not necessarily like his hottest players. It was one of his longest time students who was, he had to be practically 70 years old himself, but he wanted him to play on the stage. He wanted his students to shine. He wanted them to be the center. And the final thing was he wanted his clarinet choir to play Danny Boy. And he wanted to conduct. Well, he was in a wheelchair, of course. And his son, at Carnegie Recital Hall, there isn't really an approach to the stage, except if you go around to the back, down the side aisle, and around the corner. And it's a very... what's a word? Not circumvent. It just many turns and to get to the stage. But he got there, came on the stage, and he conducted Danny Boy. And my wife Mika was in the audience, and she said she was so profoundly moved.
Wow.
Not exactly by Cal being 90 years old in a wheelchair and conducting, but that the music was so expressive and so vital, and he was like every note was this, and he would extend conducting a bunch of clarinet players in a way that you said, my God, this is the Vienna Philharmonic. It's the greatest orchestra ever. And this maestro, whoever he is, he's the real thing. Of course, it was just Cal Opperman and his students. But, what she was trying to say was that I understand why he is such a great teacher and why,
So, Dick, how long did you study with him?
Well, one of my friends, John Pearson, said, "Oh, you're studying at the Kalman Opperman University. That's the only university that you never graduate from."
Yeah. Can you share some specific things that he helped you with?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Didn't he move you to
he would drop little aphorisms like, while you're sleeping, somebody else is practicing.
Yeah.
And in fact, at 2:30 in the morning one night, he called up and he said, "What are you doing?" Well, but I dare not say I was asleep, but I was asleep. but this was his way of dealing with all of life, was that everything mattered, you know. And when I came down for lessons when I was still at Yale, I come in and he said, well, have you had breakfast? I said, well, coffee. No, you have to have a breakfast. You're going to do a day's work, you got to have a good breakfast. So we go to breakfast, and we go to his favorite deli or diner, and he'd order his breakfast and more or less watch out what I was going to eat, so I should have some good stuff in my stomach, you know. And then, okay, now we'll start the day of a lesson. And this was, and he would teach, for instance, sometimes he didn't want me to practice, except then when he could hear me. So I stayed in he had an extra room with a cot, and I slept overnight there a few nights. And then when I wake up, then I start practicing. And I continue practicing until sometimes, like, bang on the wall, because he was teaching somebody else at the time, but he heard some kind of shit that I was playing that was not good, which meant, you know, stop. And he was big on the idea of short and intense practice. Then he wouldn't say contemplation, but thinking about what you just did. How can you make it better now? All right, let's see. 60 seconds. You got, okay, like 90 seconds. Okay, 2 minutes. All right, that's enough. Go back, start practicing again. And that was one of the most huge things I learned was double lip embouchure, because I'd been enamored of Buddy Wright's playing, and at Marlborough, you know, heard him for 10 years there. I was playing there, and one time at the dining hall, I just said, you know, do you teach? No. So what? Who can teach double lip? Do you know somebody who could teach? But he said, I don't know. Ralph McLean. He's dead. Okay. Well, they said, but Cal Opperman studied with Ralph McLean. I said, okay. And, you know, where is he? Well, he's in New York. Well, that's then how I got started with Cal, because not only did I want to learn these sort of things like making reeds, but I wanted to know how to actually hold the clarinet in my mouth and play, you know? And so he started me on that. And it was one of the summers where I was supposed to do a Music from Marlborough tour. And Felix Galimir was the leader of the group. We were doing the octet, Schubert octet. And I remember we were having rehearsals in May, and I told Felix, you know, my teacher doesn't think I should play for more than a minute or two I'm changing embouchures. He said, what? We're going on a tour, you know? And so I said, would you call Mr. Opperman, you know, just call him and tell him that I have to do this, you know, playing. So he called Mr. Opperman, and Mr. Opperman talked to Mr. Galimir, and they were on the same page. They're both totally convinced that the teacher was the man. He controlled the student, not controlled, that's not the right word. He was molding the student. He was making the student into the best possible violinist or clarinetist. And it was not that long a conversation, is it? And so, I mean, Gallagher said, whatever you think, Mr. Opperman, whatever you think, Mr. Opperman. And that was it. So I just spent my summer, playing. I forget what he said, a minute on, 2 minutes off or something, and just playing, and only in the low register and so on and so forth. That was my way of learning with Cal.
So what benefits did you find double lip gave you when you finally switched 100%?
Well, I think everybody who plays double lips agrees pretty much on the benefit. The benefits are, first of all, well, of course, my lips are so fat. I know don't lose control.
I'll try the best I can.
Yeah. So these lips, if you want to use the fancy term, labia. No, I'm kidding. Just erase that part. So open when you put your lip over the top and the bottom, open your mouth another easily 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so there you go. You're already widening the resonance possibilities of the tone before it even leaves your head and goes into the clarinet. Cal, you don't know where the fingers are, holes are on the clarinet. When you're playing heavily on the clarinet, if you bite enough, you can keep the clarinet steady. Can't do that with double lip. So you start going like this, so it's wiggling around, and you can't do it. So automatically, again, you have, first of all, a more open resonance inside your head. You have hands that have to totally give in to a legato style of pressure. Then you find out I had a pretty good tongue for articulation, but when I used that way of tonguing with double lip embouchure, the clarinet went and just shot out. I had a fairly aggressive and strong tongue, and the clarinet, I couldn't keep the clarinet in my mouth. So I had to learn how to use my tongue to create the vibration of the reed and the sound that I wanted to get on the articulation in such a way that I didn't move this very, at the beginning, fragile embouchure. So those were the basic benefits, I would say, in terms of that.
I have a question. You mentioned Buddy Wright. I remember Elsa Verder was double lip, and they always sat down. What was it a challenge learning to stand up with double lip?
Oh yeah, that was a challenge. That was a challenge.
How did that work? What do you have to do to be able to do that compared to some others who never did that?
Well, I think you inure yourself to pain, for one thing.
Okay.
you just stand. It's like I just said, well, first of all, you have to shoot yourself in the head, and you're going.
You're not the first person to suggest that in my case. No.
So anyway, you do it a little at a time, and you augment your practice times, but you're always resting. These are things that you actually should be doing however you play the clarinet. But double lip just enforces it. That's it. I started using a piece of paper or a piece of plastic or something over especially my upper teeth, because they're pretty sharp. And that gave me a little bit of help. I remember Cal told me to go to his dentist, Ron Odridge, who is a great clarinet player, And I asked Ron about, somebody's told me that you could maybe blunt the teeth, sand them down or something. I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. And so I just learned how to, I guess the word would be use my time with the clarinet, other than sticking it in my face all the time. So the standing up started, I'd say, I'm sort of guessing, maybe a couple of years. I think that one of the first things I had to play after taking those years with Cal on double lip was, I think I had to play Copland Concerto. And so, you can't play concerto sitting. I mean, I guess you can play this. Yo-yo plays sitting down, but anyway, yeah, I was standing up. So, but it was a great start for me using the Copland Concerto to play double lip. It's not impactful in the beginning, and there are great places to breathe, relax your muscles, get back. Even the cadenza, it doesn't have to be played like from beginning to end. It can be played in section. Every time you release the muscles from their pressure and their stress for even a second, 1 second, 2 seconds, the blood goes back and so on. And you get used to how that you accommodate your own playing, with double lip. So I play sitting down. In fact, I played a concert. I can't believe I did this, but I had to sit down. But not that I had to sit down, but that was in. Hey, Mika. Oh well. So someplace in Japan, and I was doing both the Mozart and the Copland Concerto, and we had 3 rehearsals in one day. One was the night before, and the concert was in the afternoon. One was the night before. Second was in the morning, and the third was prior to the concert, which was at I think 4 o'clock. It was mainly because there had been an earthquake in someplace in Japan, and they had to cancel the first rehearsal. So everything had to be into this. And I played both concertos on all 3 rehearsals, standing up. And much to my amazement, I could do that, but I was tired. And I still had to play the concert. So I told the concertmaster, hey, do you mind if I sit sort of close to you and just sit down and play? I said, it's fine, So I played the Mozart concerto sitting down. And instead of feeling ashamed or inadequate or like a bad person, I was playing chamber music. I was only like I was social distanced from the concertmaster. I can't believe I'm using that phrase. Anyway, we were about 6 feet apart. So, and I had to concentrate one way or the other. I was either going to look at the maestro or I was going to look at the fiddles section. So I chose the fiddle section. And, basically the maestro is there to hopefully encourage you to play beautifully and have the orchestra play well behind you. not to show you where the beat is. So it was a great experience. It's like playing quintet, except of course, but with even a more contact with the string feeling, like as if you say played Mozart quintet, but instead of playing on the other side of the violins or in the middle or something, you just sat next to the first violin and played. It was great. It was so comforting, not comforting, but homey, kind of like make it chamber music, and then that relieve the pressure on my lips for that basically 23 or 4 minutes that concerto, and then we had a break, intermission, and I just I laid on the floor and just didn't do anything but breathe, and then started Copland concerto, and I felt great. And I didn't have, but that's the one thing I would say with double lip is, to do 2 concertos and rehearse them twice in a day and then play them isn't. That's not a good idea. But I don't even know if that's a good idea for a single lip.
Right. So how about some of your other teachers? Like I remember Keith Wilson, when you heard him do the Brahms quintet. I've been watching your interviews for years.
Yeah, I have a story about that because
Sure.
when I went to Yale, I had not really played much, in terms of chamber music. You usually, unless you go to a conservatory, you don't get that many opportunities to play with string players and stuff. You just don't. So I never ever played the Brahms quintet, and in fact, I should confess this, but why not? It's too late. I'd never heard the Brahms clarinet quintet. Anyway, so this was the summer before I was going to start studying with Mr. Wilson, and I was in the audience, of course, and they came out for the Brahms quintet, and I thought to myself, wow, I have never actually heard Mr. Wilson play, and this is exciting. I'm going to be working with him for 3 years. The plan then at Yale was you do 3 years, and then you automatically are you can get a doctorate if you want one, but they would just basically 3. So I'm going to spend the next 3 years listening to him. I closed my eyes and just waited, to hear the sound. And, da da dee da da da. I had my eyes closed. I'm listening, and I'm thinking, when is he going to play? When is he going to play? I open my eyes and, oh my God, he is playing. But I don't hear clarinet. All I hear is I just hear the quintet. I just hear five voices. I don't hear clarinet. So I finally understood what this means. Chamber music. It means you don't play the solo. You don't play like a solo. You play the chamber music with the other chamber musicians in a way that reflects Brahms. So that was a great lesson to realize that I was hearing the clarinet as it sounded in a string group, as Mr. Wilson conceived it. And Mr. Wilson used vibrato, and that basically gave me more feeling that vibrato was a way of using sound to be expressive. Vibrato is a I mean, what if you don't vibrate, you're not alive. I mean, everything's alive because it's vibrating, even molecules and so on. So it isn't something foreign to music. And there's a very, very old idea that I think clarinet players sort of thought you're not legitimate or something if you use vibrato. I remember somebody saying Reginald Kell. Well, Reginald Kell, yes, he's a great player, but he uses vibrato. And so, okay, well, but I don't know what that means, but I guess Reginald Kell, you shouldn't. Okay. So this is a funny thing about clarinet players. And but vibrato it sounds like it's a thing, but of course it's a force of life, and it's a source of life, and it's a non-ending evolution from tone that's electronically straight, electronically, inhumanly straight, like a computer tone. Does that sound horrible?
Yeah. No, it doesn't sound horrible.
It sounds horrible to me. It's horrible. But then the vibrato happens when you breathe. Your breath vibrates. It doesn't go and go like this. And when we're talking using vibrato. If we didn't use some kind of vibrato to make our vocal cords vibrate, we wouldn't be able to speak. So it's what I'm just saying is it's a universal part of life, and it's sad that a few clarinet players have decided that it's something, like somehow clarinet players decided that you should put your teeth on the mouthpiece. That's how you play. I remember doing a master class for some kids in Italy, in Verona, and a guy came, old guy, not the normal kids, and he came up afterwards and hugged me, kissed me, and I said, "Oh, thank you," And he said, "No, not about you, but you do it, but lips, two lips." And he was speaking, basically what he was trying to say was that this is the way that everybody used to play. This is how we played. And then if somebody changed, then and you're doing this is, it was all done in sign language and Italian. But I got the message, and I thought, wow, this is kind of an emotional thing with clarinet players, I guess.
And how about before Yale? You were a math major, math and music, weren't you?
Uh-huh.
And what about the language of math and the language of music? Similarities, differences?
Yeah, I'm not ready to get into that too much. I had a letter from a big mathematical society in Washington. They wanted me to give a talk on just what you're saying, that music and mathematics. And, I said, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And then I started thinking about it. I said, oh, I don't know if I can. This is, I can, you can draw different kinds of parallels and conclusions, but it's not as interesting as just the fact of music being so human and touching, and I find sometimes, like when I was studying composition at Yale, also that the 12-tone system is sort of considered to be a mathematical system. Each tone you don't repeat until you use all 12, and then, of course, then it grew from that kind of simplistic limitation to the whole universe of tone and music. And that reminds me of, this is sort of off the what's the track? I don't know what the track is. This is sort of off the track, but I did some classes, master classes, where kids were playing Gras, and I didn't even know the piece. I never heard of it, but teachers were giving it to their students, and I went over to look at the stand to see, was it Gras, Gras, and so who wrote this? And Elliott Carter. Oh, Elliott Carter. Whoa, 1993. How come I don't know about this piece? I should know about this piece. So I bought the music and started looking at it, and I realized that the reason I didn't know about it is because it wasn't. I say this with modesty that I don't have. People weren't playing it right. They just weren't playing it right. And I started looking like I do when I spend time looking at the composer, like Brahms or Mozart or Debussy, and I'm looking for all the clues. You could say mathematical clues, but you're looking for the kind of secrets of interpretation. And I mean, Gras, you're told, because there's a footnote that says it's a Polish term. It means play or playful. It also was meant to be in honor of Ludosławski, and Carter and he would do games together. They loved playing chess together, and so they were of the same kind of intellect, and so these things were fun for them. So Gras means game. It sort of also means fun, but it's got some very interesting things you have to start thinking about. One of them is, what's the composers say about the music? I mean, other than the title. Usually, well, allegro or moderato or revisement, Debussy would say. But no composer I know of has ever said, "Ghiribizzoso." What's that? That's the direction that Elliott Carter gives to performers of his piece Gras. "Ghiribizzoso." What's that mean? It means something eccentric, something whimsical, something unusual, something at the moment. It's one of those great Italian terms that just is you can love it, and it'll change forms for you if you want. So from that one word, which is all, it's like Mozart. He gave you one word for the beginning of the clarinet concerto, allegro. Okay, well that'll take me somewhere. Where's that going to take me? So with the Ghiribizzoso in my mind, and I started looking at the first 4 measures of the piece. They're in 5/4. The first 4 measures only have 4 notes. What are those 4 notes? They're the 4 notes of the beginning of the tone row that he's playing with. On the 5th measure, the 5th note of the tone row is introduced. Oh, what's going on here? A little bit of Ghiribizzoso. A little bit of playing around, a little bit of like, what's going on? And it just keeps on like that. The second page is pretty much 2 and 2s. And the final note, the 12th note, is revealed of the tone row. And the game is making about every second or so phrase what's the word he uses? It's a very common musical term. Mika, you don't know what it is? Anyway, I'll think of it.
Hey, we have John Ye and Charlie Nightingale know this piece. Anyone know the word that he's looking for? We'll just keep. Oh yeah. And by the way, Lorenzo, who's Italian, says that's a very common word in Tuscany. Mika's getting your attention.
No, you are going to water.
Oh, my voice needs water, Mika says.
Okay. Anyway, you want to continue with it a little bit, or shall we?
Did they give you the answer?
Not yet. I'm sorry to say.
Okay. Probably. All right. Hang on. No wonder.
Yeah.
The word is espressivo.
Oh,
espressivo. How many times does he write espressivo on the first page? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 times on the first page of a 5-page. All right. Espressivo. What other marks? Accents. What other marks? Legato, crescendos, diminuendos. Second page, first measure, espressivo. Ah, a new word. Leggero, giocoso. Oh, no. Espressivo, 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 espressivo. Okay. So this is Elliott Carter saying what? What is he saying? What is he saying? What is he trying to say? Besides giribizzoso. He's saying, play my music with expression. And this is what was missing from all the pretty amazing performances that I heard from kids playing Gras when I didn't know what it was. I mean, they were technically overwhelmingly masterful, and dynamics were super, and articulations were great. But espressivo, where is that? Where is that in the 12-tone system? No, it's not in the 12-tone system. Espressivo comes from inside, and it comes through the voice. The voice has, what do we say, Andy? How do you use this? Vibrato. Espressivo vibrato, as they say in, on the West Side. So this was, for me, at my advanced age, a revelation. Not so much the word espressivo, but what composers are desperately trying in their language to say to performers, please make my music expressive. Brahms does it. How does Brahms do it? He wrote, I mean, for the clarinet players, probably the greatest two sonatas we have, right? And aside from giving you the dynamics and occasionally a crescendo or diminuendo, what words does he give you? Well, the second, what's the word that he gives you in the second sonata? Children, let's all say it together. Amabile. That's one of Brahms' favorite. No, it is. Amabile. I can't imagine Brahms going around saying amabile, but he wrote it as what he wanted Richard Mühlfeld to play. He wanted him to play amabile. What's amabile mean? It's not like giribizzoso. Amabile is something espressivo from the heart, together, insieme, with like minds. And I can imagine Brahms sitting at the piano with his favorite clarinet player, playing this piece and saying to Richard, amabile, that's us, amabile. Right? I'm going to play and you're going to play we're going to play amabile together, Richard. That's what we're going to do. Because you know why? Because I love your playing, and I love the way you play the clarinet, and I love that you use vibrato. No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that. That's fiction. That's fiction.
But what I've read is that Mühlfeld actually did have quite a big vibrato.
Okay, but I'm telling you a different story.
Okay.
Yeah. What I heard was that Richard Mühlfeld, the reason why Brahms, after hearing the clarinet his whole life and had never written one iota a piece for it, except in the orchestra parts, and then writing a letter to Clara and saying, "I finally heard my nightingale, the clarinet, from this guy, Richard Mühlfeld." Probably was because Richard Mühlfeld probably started out like a lot of musicians playing a string instrument at first, before he played the clarinet. Probably started, I don't know, but maybe, 4 or 5. Oh, wait a minute. I get it. Using a string instrument. And so that, I think, was part of it. But anyway, isn't that kind of fascinating, this idea that the composer's reaching out to you? Yes, they've written the most amazing notes, but then they need you still. Not I mean, yeah, they need you to play the notes, but they need you to play them giribizzoso or amabile. Or in Brahms' case, he only used basically 2 words for Richard and him. Do you know what they are?
Richard,
it's not a test. It's not a test. Well, the most often I find is dolce. And he writes that, for instance, in this second sonata we're talking about, that sounds dolce, right? Well, not from me, but I mean, but that's not where he writes dolce. He writes it. He puts the dolce in a place that is, not where you think he should put it at the beginning of the phrase or beginning of this, but he sticks it in this place because why? Because he's realizing that he wants his Richard Milfold or the clarinet player to hone in on this interval, this legato place, this chromatic note, whatever it is, this change. Go deeper into that. There's something there that needs your help. I can only write the dots, but there's something there. Please help me. And that he dolce. And the other one is like Elliott Carter. He writes espressivo. I remember the first time I saw that in something Brahms. I said, "What? I'm playing the whole thing espressivo, Brahms. I don't know about you, but what? Why are you sticking espressivo in here?" But then you start thinking, oh, there is a reason why he puts it there. There's something you don't get yet, and you couldn't until you start pulling apart the composition and trying to find out what's going on. And with the Carter, espressivo is like, it's littered all over the place. But there's one place at the very end, the last third line from the end, he writes, not espressivo, but molto espressivo. Now you look at that phrase, I mean, I can't show you it.
Right, okay.
Oh, is this a copyright thing? You can't do this, right?
No. It might take a while. Yeah, well, we see it in espressivo. Haven't seen the molto. Oh yes, we see the molto espressivo going into bar 97. Got it.
Molto espressivo at the very end of the piece, of this basically 12-tone oriented piece. Molto espressivo. Why? This is not a quiz. I'm not.
No, we're true. So
what? So we don't know. And I could go to the Mathematical Society and give a lecture on the influence of math on music and music on math, but I'm not going to be able to explain why Elliott Carter, who was a very brilliant mathematical person, writes molto espressivo. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bars before the end. Molto espressivo. Where are you going to find that? You're not going to find that in books, right? You're going to find it in here. What is molto espressivo to you personally, you, Andy? Huh? What's most expressive to you in your life? This is what we're looking for out of the clarinet, is what is our instrument for? It's certainly not for technical reasons, and usually it's not for money. So it's for expression. It's for expression of what? Of what's inside of us. Why we had, why I cried when my teacher in my first teacher, I started crying because I was losing, I thought, my chance to be what I was with my teacher, my first teacher, and with all my teachers, expressive. You can be expressive with your mom and your dad and your friends and everything, but espressivo is something very, very, you can't talk about too much. You can't, it's inside too much. It's in a place that you have because you're a musician, but you can't just turn it on and off or play it faster or slower or make it more articulated or get louder or softer. It doesn't have anything to do with that. What is it? That's not an answerable question, but it is something that when you see it, you're in contact with the spirit of the composer and what he wanted. And then you start to go as deep as you can and express that.
Great. Both practically and philosophically, I mean, you just were talking about vibrato, and why shouldn't we play with vibrato? We're supposed to vibrate just because a few clarinetists told us not to. But when you actually examine your entire career, I mean, I remember talking to you 30 years ago, and you didn't do competitions, you didn't get a big orchestra job or something. All of a sudden, you're playing with vibrato when people are saying you're not supposed to play the clarinet with vibrato, and you decide to go into this path that honestly, 50 years ago, it was absolutely unheard of. I mean, I think there was a huge maverick side to you. I really I don't listen to people. This is just where I'm going. Did people tell you you can't do this? And did you have doubts yourself?
I'm nodding my head in affirmative. Yes, I had doubts.
Yeah,
I had doubts when I think maybe my third or fourth audition for an orchestra, and I was eliminated immediately every time. And but one thing that kind of helped me in a strange way was I auditioned for Seiji Ozawa when he was in San Francisco and I was living in San Francisco, and he already knew me because I was playing with Tashi, and he loved Peter Serkin. And so I think it was simply I called the office or something, and he let me come down and play for him because, I was in Peter's band, the Tashi group. So I played for him. Actually, I think I didn't know any orchestra excerpts. So I played. I think I played some of the third movement of Messiaen or something. I don't know. Anyway, he said, "Dick, you'll never get into an orchestra. You don't belong in one." It wasn't negative. It wasn't positive. You'll never get into an orchestra. You don't belong in one. And I left the audition in a kind of state of ambivalence, and I'm still, at 78, sort of in a state of ambivalence about what. When am I ever going to really play, so I can get into an orchestra or so that I can prove something to somebody? And I think the answer is coming closer and closer to never. And the reason why is because we are all playing from someplace else in our hearts, that place that Brahms says, dolce, espressivo, or Carter says, molto espressivo. Or like Debussy says, pianissimo, penetrant. The beginning of the Debussy is piano, but when the theme finally comes in, and the strings are, and you have the theme. But he doesn't even say piano. He says pianissimo. Penetrating pianissimo. Penetrating. How do you do that? This is the thing composers, they tried to say. I remember when Tashi was doing our coaching with Messiaen, and Messiaen, I played the third movement for him. And in the return, you play the same thing, you know. But then at the end, you come back an octave lower. Well, you know, the same thing, low F sharp, but the same marking that says piano, both piano and désolé. Désolé is not exactly a marking for dynamics, but it is a marking for you. Désolé, where's désolé for you? But so I was playing the return piano and everything, and Messiaen got up. He was such a terrifying and intimidating figure, and we played this the piece for him, and then we played it again for him, and all the time he had the score. He was looking. I mean, he was only about like he was social distance. He was like 10 feet away, listening to this and turning the pages as if he'd never seen. I don't know, but that's what he was looking at the music, looking at me. He wasn't looking at us. He wasn't looking at how we were, grooving and how fantastic we were playing together. And he's looking at the music. And so he got up. I started this last part, and he said, "Désolé." But I knew that. I mean, it's in my part. Désolé. Okay. So I played it again. I wasn't sure how. I knew there was something he didn't like about it. So then he got up and stood over me and said, "Noir." Well, I'm an educated person, so I know that noir is the French word for, well, black or dark. But this is not helping. I played again, like it said, softly. I felt desolated. I really started to feel not just desolated, but discombobulated, and a little more shaky. And I got about 2 measures in, and he came closer to me, and he said, "Noir!" So you're laughing. I wasn't laughing.
No, I'm sure you weren't.
I wasn't laughing. And so what am I supposed to do? 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 So I started again, but I was definitely désolé, but I was also feeling noir. I was feeling, and I bit down with my double lip embouchure on the mouthpiece hard because I was a little bit scared and a feeling like I'd done everything I could do, and he wasn't happy, and much more pressure than I would normally play for the désolé piano. My breath control for that was always positive, but sort of floating. And this time I played with a feeling, my breath blowing like this. And of course it wasn't exactly piano, but Messiaen sat down. He didn't say, "Ah, bien, very good, very good." But he sat down. And I think what he had been trying to say to me was that this is not désolé in a soft kind of Debussy floaty kind of thing. This was désolé in a very dark place, a very dark place. And I don't want to hear beautiful clarinet tone playing piano. I wrote piano. Yeah, that's right. I wrote piano. That's right. Yeah. But that's not it. You're returning on this pretty epic solo, about eight minutes, to the same theme, but it's got to be noir.
Someone had requested you tell this story, and I was going to go here. So this fantastic anecdote. I want to ask you a question. I went on your website. I don't know if it's your complete discography, but I counted. Guess how many CDs you've made?
120.
65. Which still sounds, at least on your website, which sounds like a lot to me. My question is, I mean, you're talking about Messiaen, you're talking about all this stuff. Are there any pieces you want to record that you haven't yet?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, lots of pieces. Or even some I'd like to. Mika, my wife, is saying, you got to record this piece again. You did this like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Now you're almost 80 years old. You have to play this piece again, And I thought, why? But I thought, well, I am a different person. And I've had a little bit more, ups and downs and trials and tribulations and experiences. And I think I'm starting to understand what the composers are asking more. Not that I can do it, but they're asking it. And I should start to think about that a little more, and not particularly about my presence on the stage or my anything, me, but what is going on. So yeah, I do have pieces. There's a piece I'd like to record that's Lucas Foss gave me. We did several tours together. That was a magnificent feeling for me to play with the composer. I mean, not exactly like Brahms and Mozart, but it was the same feeling of this composer playing music, and he played music of his, I would say, friends, equals, and contemporaries, like Hindemith, like Bartok, like Berg, like Copland, and and such. But he played this music all by. He would always, a little bit like Peter Serkin, he would look at the music as, he had it all memorized. Peter did too, but it never like, or look at me, or kind of sitting back. It was always like staring at the music. I thought, well, this is this is why a composer is a composer. They're looking at the composition, they're playing the things and all that, but they're looking at the composition. And so I want to play this piece that Lucas wrote for Artie Shaw, and he gave it to Artie Shaw in 1945, and he told me. I asked him if he had another piece for the he'd written a clarinet concerto for me, but and I transcribed his 3 American pieces for clarinet, and we played those a lot for piano. But I said, anything else? And he sort of thought, he said, well, I got this piece in my drawer. So he brought it to me, a pencil score of Elegy, and I said, hasn't it been placed? No. Artie didn't he didn't play it. He didn't say he didn't like it or anything like that. He said he just didn't play it. And I'm sure there are many reasons why Artie Shaw didn't play almost everything. But I started looking at it and thinking about the word elegy, first of all, and then seeing what he had marked in there, he meaning the composer, and listening to the intervals. The intervals are so important, and composers know about intervals like we sort of sometimes don't as a clarinet player. That's why I always think like cellists know intervals. They know. Pianists know intervals. Clarinet players, what interval? Oh, you want a higher end? I push this button on the back. There's a higher end. You want lower? Okay. So nothing. We're not thinking in intervallically, but Lucas was, and that was one of the things about playing with him, playing Bayreuth with him, playing Hindemith with him. I remember somebody in the audience, we would do Q&A, and they said, well, what are your memories of Hindemith? You were a student of his, yes. He sort of looked like he was going to say something profound. My fondest memory of Hindemith was in the summer at Tanglewood. He had a composition class, and he taught the class, and then he would take us down to the little pond. And my fondest memory is of Hindemith going to the edge of the little dock in his fairly capacious swimming shorts, and the sound of his body, his plump body, splashing into the water. I thought, okay, there's going to be some more story. That was it. That was his remembrance of Hindemith. And now I think, wow, that was such a profound thing to say, because we talk about Hindemith in his scholarly ways and how he mastered this system of overtone series and his incredible mastery of all the instruments and sonatas for everybody and everything. The sound of Hindemith's body flopping. Sweet. It's very sweet. And when when Lucas would play the composers that he knew, like Copland, he played some songs of Copland. Oh man, his touch was so revealing of sentiment, sadness, and a kind of serenity as he would play. I asked him once, how did you, that kind of teaching? He said, I learned that when I was 14, that kind of playing the piano when I was in France. This is how my teacher, I don't think it was Boulanger, but it was somebody of that ilk, and this is all the effort you need, and this is the sound that you want to make on the piano, and you just do that. You don't know, you have to do any this. I remember Lucas writing the concerto for me, and at the end, the end, all the musicians are given the information, play actively with great energy, felt but not heard, seen but not heard. And for the clarinet, it was the same words. So what? It's just, anyway, you see, we've worked on and we start playing, and then I'm going like this. Quiet, totally quiet. And then the audience is like slightly concerned. Then they're like looking around, like, what is happening? And then you put your instruments down. there's a little bit of a clapping and smiles. And I thought, this is a kind of reaction that he has managed to put into his music. Not the bravo, 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 or yuck, but rather like bemusement and sympathy and a little bit bewildered and kind of softly reassuring, like sound is going on. We can't hear it anymore, but we can see it. The sound, it's still happening. Can't hear it. But it's a magical, it's sort of a trick, but it's a magical statement too by Lucas, I think.
Well, there's so many composers that have written works for you, and it turns out, I mean, just doing a little research, there's all kinds of world premieres by people I haven't heard of. Would you just name off the top of your head a lot of the best known composers perhaps that have written works for you? Yeah, of course we know about Steve Reich and many others.
Well, there are a lot of composers that have written for me that I honestly, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to bring up their names, because I did a recording project with William Thomas McKinley, who's a composer I can tell you has written 5 concertos for me and written other amazing works, and is one of the greatest composers I know of. He passed away, unfortunately. William Thomas McKinley. We went to school together at Yale, and then he just became who he was, and great jazz pianist also. But he started this Master Musicians Collective record company in Europe at the time when the dollar and especially the Polish money were very far apart, and you could get the Warsaw Philharmonic or the Czech Radio Orchestra or the Slovak Radio Orchestra for very, very not so much money. And he thought, as a composer, of course, this, all composers want to write symphonies and big pieces, but they can't get them played. They can't even get like a reading. So he found out about this discrepancy or disparity or proportion of funds, and it got composers to get a grant for like $5,000 or something from the Rockefellers or some kinds of thing, and record with these excellent orchestras in Poland, in Slovakia, and different places. Basically 2 hours at the most. But these guys, great. They sight read everything, no problem. They made it sound fantastic. And so I think I must have had like more than 20 concertos written, because some composers knew me or they knew Tom or something, and I would say maybe selfishly, they wanted somebody like Richard Stoltzman to record their piece, and they would have an entree into some other performances, maybe even something broadcast or something like that. And so for about 5 or 6 years, I went to Europe, to Warsaw, and to Slovakia every summer and recorded pieces. It was fantastic for me. I didn't get paid, but I did really learn how to learn music and contemporary music, and fast. and well, and play these pieces in front of a fine orchestra with ideally no mistakes at all, or if I did make a mistake, apologize and do it again, because everything was taped. So I wasn't performing. I mean, I was performing, but I was not, I was aware only of microphones and the booth. So that's where I got like at least 20 concertos written for me. But the ones that I'm very fond of are the composers who have become so close to me, like Toru Takemitsu, who passed away. But his sense of sound and his way of articulating what he wanted from the music through his manuscript was super, just super. And it was daunting for orchestras because it was kind of looked like for a professional, say, orchestra, especially in America, as like, what is this, all this stuff? Measuring like a crescendo and a diminuendo with a dotted line where you get to this much of it and then down from this, and this is what the tempo is, a dotted eighth note equals 30 or something. So, what? You can imagine conductors working on it. One of the most amazing things with Takemitsu's piece, I did this great moment for me and for my mom especially, was playing the 1791, 1891, 1991 great works for the clarinet, which meant the Brahms quintet, the Mozart concerto, and the Takemitsu concerto in Vienna with the, in the case of the Brahms, it was with the, I think it was the Artis quartet, and with the Mozart and Takemitsu was with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra, and Raphael Frubeck de Burgos was conducting. And Takemitsu had already heard me play this piece several times. But he brought his family to Vienna because it was an occasion. It was a big deal for me, my mom, and, well, that's it. for me and my mom, it was a big deal. So I played the piece, and afterwards, Takemitsu said, I think my music is beautiful. And, I thought about why he would say that. And one of the things which I thought was like a little bit not so kosher was that Frubeck de Burgos, all the other composers had paid attention meticulously to Takemitsu's time and to his crescendos, and people like two oboes crescendoing here, and then 1/8 note later, the clarinets crescendoing here, and it did a lot of like trying to sculpt all this stuff. Very, it was right. I mean, this is what but we only had one rehearsal, and Frubeck de Burgos, and it was with cameras, and it was, high definition. It was the first time they used high definition. So it's a lot of hubbub about getting things staged, but very little about, can we try this again, gentlemen, or anything like that. So he just raised his baton and just started big gestures, a little faster than, but no subdividing, no little things at all. And I thought to myself, this is what Takemitsu wrote, all these little things, all these little details, but what he hoped was going to come out was just this grand song, as he called it, fantastic song, Phantasma Cosmos, Phantasma Cantos. And he said, now I know that I can write beautiful music.
I heard you. I'm going to say 1992 Proms in London. Do that piece with Tadaaki Otaka.
Uh-huh.
Did he commission that, Otaka?
Yes. He was, I think, a good friend with Takemitsu and the Wales BBC Orchestra had set aside, as you know, all radio orchestras do, money for commissions. Ha ha ha! But this is what we got. Yeah, it was great. He wrote it. He wrote it for me. It was supposed to be for something else, and in his dear heart said, "Dick, I'm going to write this piece and for you." So I got this piece, which probably would have cost about $40,000 or $50,000 for free, and I loved it, and I practiced it a lot, very, very assiduously. I really basically almost had it memorized, although I didn't. But I wrote out. I tell students this, and they don't believe me. I have the manuscript. I wrote out every. But first of all, I got the score first without parts weren't printed, so it was a score, and the score was in C. So if I wanted to start learning my part, I had to. I copied out my part. His handwriting was very meticulous and very small, and so I wrote out my whole part in pencil, and which was, as it turns out, great. And I learned the music from that, and I also learned something interesting about how a composer and his publisher sometimes can't always be on the same page, on the same page. Takemitsu had written a refrain, it's not a refrain, like a kind of clarinet and orchestra cadenza that comes twice in the piece. The piece is called Phantasma Cantos, and it's built around the idea of a go-round garden where the person goes into the garden and starts around, stops a little bit, looks at the garden from this angle, so that it gets to the top, stops, looks at the garden from this angle, comes around the other side, looks at the garden from this angle, and then finally at the end comes back and looks at the garden from his first, where he entered the garden. But the idea being the psychological, the physical, the thing is that you are in the same place where you were, and you're seeing the same things that you saw, but now you've seen them from the side, from the back, from in between, and it's not the same place again. And he's tried to do this in music. So it's a fantastic idea. And on the return of the clarinet cadenza, he wrote calm, as he did write for the clarinet at the beginning. On second time through, same notes, he writes calm and ecstatic. Calm and ecstatic. So I didn't have anything, but I wrote this in my part and everything. When the printed parts came, and I thought, finally, I've got some good printed parts. And I looked, and it said calm the first time and calm the second time. And I asked Toru, what's the deal? Why? What happened to calm and ecstatic? And he said, my publishers said, you don't understand English very well. You can't be both calm and ecstatic. And so we didn't even bother with, we just erased that. And then he said, Dick, is that did I do a mistake there? And I said, you did not do a mistake. And I used my pencil part and I used the other part, but I wrote in calm and ecstatic on the return. And this is the kind of thing that is why even somebody like Brahms was going nuts with his, you see his manuscripts and all this stuff he scribbled out, and he didn't, he wanted to make sure that it was exactly the way, for printing's sake, that it would carry on. And so, there are a lot of composers like, oh man, I mean, I have, Rautavaara. Do you know Rautavaara? Oh my God. He is one of the most amazing composers. I was lucky enough to have Ted, oh shoot, what's his last name? He was an amateur clarinetist and a lawyer, and he wanted a piece of music written in memory of his mom, who had brought him, she was an usher at the Carnegie Hall, and had brought him as a little kid and he just felt like his mom had kept him playing the clarinet and kept him loving music. And so he found out from my manager, Frank Solomon, how is this possible to get a piece written and dedicated? So Frank said, it's easy. You have to have the cash, but and the right composer and so he said, well, I want it for clarinet. So then I started listening to a lot of composers because I wanted to find somebody that would be full of song. And I happened on this guy, Rautavaara, who had written a lot of music for choir and voice. And he's written operas too. He's passed away, but he wrote a lot of
Finnish. Finnish composer.
Finnish, yes, Finnish. Yes, Finnish, right. And so he I met him at Carnegie Hall. We was having the Philadelphia was playing his 7th Symphony. And so he came, and I said, well, how about we sign and seal and deliver, because I love your music, and we have a patron who's willing to do, if you dedicate it to his mom. And he said, oh, that's very nice. Well, I've never written anything for the clarinet, so you'll have to come and play for me. Oh, I said, okay. Well, I thought he was just staying in a hotel room near Carnegie Hall. He said, yes, will you contact my agents and they'll give you my home address, which was in Helsinki, And I, not like exactly, I'll drop by sometime. But this was his terms, so we talked. I came to a lot of stories. I don't want to go into all these stories, but what was interesting was when we were talking about the music, and I told him that some of my most memorable moments were with playing the Copland Concerto. And why? Well, because it's finally I'm playing an American piece, so I don't have to think about how would Germans play it, or how would French people play it, or how would English. I just play it like an American. But also, I played it because my mom liked it so much. She called it the harp piece. I said, Mom, it's not the harp piece, it's the clarinet concerto. It's not the harp piece. But I like the harp. I like the harp. And so I told him that little story. And when we came to the performance, to the performance in Helsinki, there was a prominent part for the harp. And I thought he was, telegraphing to me that, and the other thing was he was a big fan of Benny Goodman's. And he said, I love Benny Goodman and his group, with Lionel Hampton. I said, oh yeah, Lionel Hampton's great. So in the music, in the final music, there's this beautiful thing for vibes in the music. Nobody knows that, I mean, you can say, oh, that's a nice orchestral color, but I know that the composer himself was trying to give me a little message about his, appreciation of Benny Goodman, the sound of the vibes and everything. So it was very personal without ever stepping on anybody's toes. I just found that to be special. So working with Rautavaara was wonderful. And when he finished the piece, he said, "I'm going to dedicate it to this man's mother, but I'd also like to dedicate it to your sound." So it says, in the dedication to Mrs. From her brother, her son and her daughter, and also dedicated to the sound of Richard Stoltzman's clarinet. And this really struck me so beautifully. It didn't say, and the technique of Richard Stoltzman's clarinet, or even for the cash that he gave for this, but he said the sound. And one of the most vivid things I remember when my times, I went to Helsinki twice, and the first time was these talks, and the second time was for him to show me the first movement. And I played through the first movement. And he had some piano facility, so he played some. And we finished, and it was rough. And he took the piano music and
Oh.
I don't know why. Does it mean I really played like shit, or does it mean that he changed his mind about the whole thing and doesn't like the clarinet? What's the thing? He said, "No, I'm going to write you a new first movement. You'll have to come back again," which, but he started that day. And in fact, I remember him saying something about, well, I'm going to, can I stay here and practice, in the living room? He said, "Oh yeah, sure. I'm upstairs." And he said, "Anyway, I always open the window and listen to the birds. Listen to the birds. Listen to the birds." And I said, wow, this is a composer. He's opening up his window to listen to the birds. And this is my man, So it's a great concerto I played. Actually, I played it just a couple of years ago, but fun. I'm just going to go on, but you just say stop. But he listened to the concerto first via BBC, because I was playing it with Mika. What's her name? Oh shoot, she's gone. Anyway, so we played it with the BBC, and it was for radio, and the second movement is attacca after the first movement. And then after the second movement, which ends very quietly, attacca third. So when I was playing in London and then going to Helsinki to do the performance, first time performance in Helsinki. And he invited me to lunch over at his apartment and said, "Nick, I have to ask you a question. I think there's too much time between the second movement and the third movement. Can you, move it on?" So I said, "Well, I love this piece, but I use double lip embouchure, and my lips at the end of the second movement, it's all quiet and very long phrases. Beautiful. I love it. They're just, the blood isn't going, and I needed that time that you noticed in the radio broadcast to get my lips out." He said, "Oh." So then we had a little lunch, and then I said, this was very brave of me, but I said, "Do you think you could write a little bit of something?" What I was asking him, can you change your composition now that it's already been written, and give me some break there at the beginning? But he didn't he didn't regurgitate or something like, "Bleh, what a kind of thing is that?" He said, and then he thought about, I think he was thinking about Benny Goodman, but I was thinking, he loved the group and he loved Gene Krupa and everything.
By the way, Dick, someone wrote in, Leonard Slatkin was the conductor.
Leonard Slatkin. Thank you. Leonard. Yes. So after lunch, Rautavaara started going like, I don't know if this is going to hurt the computer, but
He's
like this on the piano keyboard, not on the keyboard, on the top, like a percussion instrument. And because it starts off in 3. And he said, well, I can't change the part's already printed. Performance is tomorrow. We can't write any new music for you, but I could write a drum solo. So that's what he did. He wrote out, and he said, how long do you need? And I said, I need about 7 or 8 measures. Okay, so he figured out this triplet motive for the drums, and incorporated that as the beginning of the 3rd movement for about 7 or 8 measures. And I came in, and it was so fantastic, and he was so great about doing this, And he said, I think that'll work, And so when he agreed to do this, I said, could I ask, you have the clarinet N on a high B. High B it's clarinet B. And I can play a high B, but you only give it to me per note. It's like an 8th note. I said, as long as I'm going to go up there, I was wondering if there's way. How about if I could just hold the note, like for like whole measure even? He didn't laugh, but he didn't grimace either. He thought about it. And he came up with, well, can you hold the note a long time? And, yeah, I can hold the note for, whatever. I could. So, and I played, this is my dream note of holding. I can hold it that long. Okay. So, I'll give the drums another solo there. Yay! Great. How to work with the composer and make something happen. It was a miracle. And the next day we played it, and then we recorded it after the next day in the concert and everything. And nobody knows that. Don't repeat that story. Nobody knows that.
It's definitely a secret now, Dick. Don't worry.
Good, because that's not for reprint or anything, and certainly not for anybody to know.
Dick, these are amazing stories with the composers, but I'm actually curious about some of the older people you've worked with of different genres. For example, I was a big fan. As a kid growing up, I used to see Mel Torme perform in the jazz festival and stuff. And then I read that you performed with him. Is that right?
Yeah. What was that
like?
Man, I wish my dad had been alive for that. That was one of the things he liked a lot of different singers, but he was not so much a Tony Bennett fan. He felt that Tony's sound wasn't quite as mellow as it should be, or something like that. And he liked Frank Sinatra, but he thought Mel Torme, I love his sound, So anyway, yeah, we did broadcast, a New Year's Eve broadcast from Baltimore, and he was sort of like the host and everything. And
when was this? How old would he have been, maybe?
Mel?
Yeah, at that time. When was this?
Well, let's see. I think both my kids were there. So, but they were very young. So if they were like, say, my oldest, Peter, was say around 8. So that means he was born in 77, 8, 7, 15. Something like 85.
It's obvious you were a math major, man.
You got me. So, yeah, but that was great for me. I love that. I got to play with one of the greatest jazz pianists of all time, and of course I can't remember his name now. But anyway, because they followed me and Mel, and I want to say Mel Powell, but I don't mean Mel Powell.
Torme.
Mel Torme, around the city, or around the various venues of Baltimore, playing things and doing things. And I did, concert and so on like that in the hall. And then I came to this club across the street and did a little jazz thing with well, anyway, he's the best. And but just show you how great he was, he had not a clue who I was, and he could care less, and the whole group could care less, really. But we did a tune, just sort of a little like a tune. I can't even remember the name of the tune. And he let me in the sense of, he could have just locked me out. He could just play like he was playing, on the drums and everybody, and it would have just been terrific, and I would have been an asshole. But his head went up, and he listened a little bit, and he kept me. He, like a good chamber musician, he helped me along, and allowed me to play enough, to feel like I was not exactly making music, but not screwing it up too much. And it was a great feeling for me. Oh man, I got to remember his name, but I'm just not going to come up with it now, because I'm thinking of like the time when I played for the big 100th anniversary of the Pops, and I played with or sang or did things with the great singer of Count Basie's band, Joe. Who are all the people out there? Has anybody got some names going here? You're probably all too young.
Useful. Get on Google, man. We'll keep on going.
Joe, and the same thing happened with him. These great jazz musicians are actually just period great musicians, and not only that, but great chamber music musicians. They're not like, we sort of think jazz is everybody takes their solo. These guys are only listening. That's what they were doing. They're listening, and the same with Joe. He listened to me. He sang Mood Indigo, and I sort of played in the
like Joe Williams.
Yeah, John Williams. Oh
no! Oh,
yeah,
how was Chicoria, your friend? Someone's John Yesa.
That's right. John Williams was conducting, but Joe Williams was the singer. Yeah.
Joe Williams was keyboard. Someone said keyboard.
Well, keyboard, and the keyboard. So I don't remember now. But it was Joe Williams group. And he was up there doing his bit for the 100th anniversary of the Boston Pops. And they thought, well, let's put this guy, me, who did the Rossini variations for the thing, and this guy together, the great jazz singer together. We did Mood Indigo, and that was another thing. I remember he said, "Well, we don't need to rehearse." I said, "Oh, I want to. Can we get together?" So he was an RCA artist also, and he happened to be down at the RCA offices, and they called me up and said, Joe Williams is down here now, but he's going to be here for like 10 minutes. Can you take a taxi down and we can have a talk? So I went down and we just sat on the couch. That was it, and I think he was just, sort of wanted to see what kind of person I was or vibe I had or something like that. And then he just patted my knee. He said, it'll be fine. No play, no notes, no rehearsal, no nothing. He went out and he did his Mood Indigo, and I played the Shalumo Register, and that was a highlight of my life.
Well, yeah, along the earlier theme of you just sort of people saying no and you saying yes, I'm really curious about your Bayreuth concert.
Oh, well, that was it wasn't meant to be a confrontation, but it was, in those days of that kind of publicity, I was first clarinet player to play at the sacred halls of Bayreuth, where all the great Wagner operas, blah, blah. But I was going to do a recital there. And it was with Bill Douglas, my great, great, great bassoon playing, jazz playing, rock etude playing friend, and he accompanied me. So we did a little bit of a jazz set. We played some classical music, I think, also, of course, but it was verboten. Das ist verboten. So it was not the most friendly kind of feeling. It is what it is. So we played. It was scary, but the audience loved it. They loved it. I don't know if they expected what they were going to get. They did probably a clarinet recital. I was going to play, hopefully, Brahms and some other, great German composers, and then get the hell out of there before I stained the stage. But I decided we would do a little bit of jazz. I was golden. It was Bill and I were just like, it was the best thing on the concert.
Hey, I remember you did some Beatles too. I remember you saying in an interview, right?
Yeah, not with them, but yeah, sure, yeah, of course. I was not. It was obvious by then I was not going to get the job in the orchestra. So I just do what I can do. And the Tashi group was great about this feeling of we're here to play the music. Peter would come out on the stage sometimes, after we'd taken a bow and then come out again. He'd just hold the music over his head and get the audience to understand that they should be applauding for the composer. That's why we're here, for the composer. So I remember one time Peter had a piece by Frank Zappa, just a short piece for clarinet and piano, and we played it through a couple of times. He said, we should play this. I said, well, we're going to program this. I don't think so. It was only about 3 minutes or so. He said, no, we'll play it. And so I forget, we were someplace in Long Island or someplace, and we played the first half of the concert, the Tashi group, and then Peter said, Dick, let's go out and do the Zappa piece. I said, well, it's not time. I mean, the intermission is not over. Let's do it. Okay. So we went out. People are talking. Some people in the bathroom and just out wandering around and stuff. We started playing the Zappa piece. I remember this older man coming up to the edge of the stage. Is this a concert? Sit down now. What's going on? You know, and it was a perfect reaction that Peter would always wanted, was like sort of incredulity, and a feeling that this is the first time, maybe the last time, but it's spontaneous, and also that it's not part of any ritual or way of being, and that if you're wandering around or you're going to the bathroom, that's okay. We're just going to play. We're here to play this little Zappa piece, and we're not going to make an announcement, and it's not in the program. Don't worry. It's okay. And this attitude, it was great for us, and we dressed however we wanted. You know, everybody. Peter, we were dressed however each one of us wanted. Peter, at one point, he had his headband and long hair and like some kind of Indian jacket and moccasins or something like that on his feet. Oh no, it was like Chinese shoes on his feet. And I'd always look great because I'd always looks great. But sometimes I wear jeans and t-shirt, and sometimes I put on a tie, or sometimes I don't know, whatever. I remember we scandalized several audiences, one in the Midwest, looking like we did, and which Peter loved, because this point was, don't pay attention to how we look. Pay attention to what's going on with the Messiaen. Listen to the Quator pour le fin du temps. But one place, it was a pretty staid audience, and we got some comments from the presenter saying some of the people, they didn't mind your playing, but they didn't like how you were dressed. So we got back there another like 2 or 3 years later, and I remember by then we were sort of over that, and we just wore whatever we were comfortable with. Was Peter like wear a suit and tie, and Fred had a suit coat tie, and I had, we all just kind of suit and ties. And one of these little old ladies came back at the intermission, and she said, what happened to your Tashi clothes? I love these clothes so much. People, they missed our hippie attire or whatever it was they thought it was,
Dick, I want to, we're going almost at the 2.5 hour mark.
I'm not counting because I'm having fun.
Yeah, likewise. So I want to take a little bit direction for a few more questions, general questions, if you allow me. The one that I'm particularly curious about, I remember talking to you again 30 years ago, the first time you came. We were on the Star Ferry, and I was asking you, and you said you had never done like competitions or anything like that, or certainly didn't win any. I thought generally didn't participate, but then I noticed you were on the recent Geneva competition jury, and I was just curious, after all these years and after such a long and thorough career, did you learn anything from that kind of experience, or what did it mean to you, that experience? What impressions did you take from it?
Well, before the Geneva jury, I was also, believe it or not, on the jury in Germany for the what's it called? The
Munich.
Yeah. And I was eliminated from the Munich competition when I came as a young person, and I was absolutely devastated. And I didn't receive any information from any of the judges. You never even saw the judges. They were in the hall, but the hall was darkened, and they had their lamps, testing you and stuff like that. And I talked to the pianist who I played with, and I said, that's it, I guess. And he said, yeah. He said, in Germany, they don't really like vibrato.
Mhm.
So that was his only answer why we didn't go to the second round. I doubt that. I think it was just I just played shitty. But mostly what I learned from that was that I didn't feel like I was doing music, or well, there wasn't any time to. You had like a 15 minutes or half an hour or something with your pianist to go over things. The pianist had learned everything meticulously. They could play anything. They were great. So it was more up to you to sort of fit in. And I didn't fit in. So that's when I realized, geez, I don't fit in. And maybe that's going to be it, for my life. And I was rooming with a guy who was from Romania, and he didn't get in either. And his whole family was a family of clarinetists, and he was the youngest in the line. And he said he can't go back because this is something that he has to achieve this. And I don't know what he was going to do, commit suicide or something, but he didn't have any food except for a chocolate bar that he ate, cut pieces of it off every day, and that was it, and practice. So the competition didn't bring out the best in me, I guess I should say. And it certainly, it works. The Geneva competition was interesting because I was way older. I was definitely the oldest person in the judging thing, but I did have some friends by then. What was Kiri
Kari Kriku?
Kari Kriku, great guy, great musician, and kind of like I don't know what you'd say, sort of a buddy or something. And also the lady who was in charge of it, she was wonderful. Oh shoot! They were actually, all the judges were cool. I mean, at that time, by that time, which was actually last year, a couple of years ago, I'm over. I don't have a like whatever happens is okay with me. But we all agreed that we would meet with any or all of the students who played afterwards in the evening and talk with anybody who wanted to know why they weren't accepted for the next round. It was the best thing to me. I mean, it wasn't the competition. It was a nurturing of people's souls. All who played, they played great. Everybody played great. I mean, but what were the honest to God feelings inside of each judge about why they weren't going to be allowed to go to the next thing? And wasn't like a simple answer, and it wasn't even a short talk. Each one had their own, insides of them that they had tried to give to you in their competition thing. And in the end, finally, I think that all the people in the competition, I think it was the young woman who was the head of it or somebody said, the reason we got you is because you don't ever haven't fit in to these things. You're sort of like not, the expected person to be the judge and everything. Well, I certainly fulfilled that role. I couldn't decide, but anyway, the 2 or 3 people that I did decide, ironically, they do the last concert, they do the last presentation with the like 3, I think at least 3, maybe 5 of the finalists on stage for a live audience, and the audience is able to sort of vote and participate, even though their votes don't count. And I got what the audiences were into. I agreed kind of with whatever the level of audience clapping or something like that, or attention, but in the end, it was somebody else. And, who is that person? I don't remember his name. Maybe he's a really great guy, but I mean, he's not. The whole concept that the judges said about me was that we want to have something, about this that designates not a competition winner, but a person who is making his names, going out and doing things that are going to be for audiences and for music and for the clarinet and stuff like that. And you are one of those people. And I said, oh, really? I don't think so. But, here I am after 30 years of not being a judge. But their hearts were in the right place. And I think competitions aren't set up exactly yet to produce the result that we maybe dream of, and it's competitions are not as musical as music. Music is very loving, forgiving, and inclusive, and it's high level, totally high level, but it's not a level that eliminates. Even people in jazz sometimes get pissed off because somebody starts doing all of their amazingly impressive licks and stuff, and they'll say, yeah, okay, you got the chops, now say something to me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so that'll tie in perhaps with where I'm going. One thing I also remember talking to you about a long time ago was teaching. And I remember the first thing you said to me was, I think it's hard. I think teaching is hard. And now I've noticed that I think you've gotten a little bit more into teaching in the last 10 or 15 years than 30 years ago when we first met. Is that fair?
I don't know. I would still say that it's impossible rather than hard. It's impossible, but as you go through your life, who do you call? Who are you going to call when you got that urge? You got to have a teacher. I mean, the teachers are your confessors sometimes. What other kind of life has one person meet with another person for half an hour every week, for a series of weeks or months or years or even decades? It's not exactly religious experience, but it's a kind of it's a kind of confessional, not for the so-called student, but for the teacher, who has to confess that they're looking for some ideal that they can't even come to themselves, and they're also so proud of the person that's in front of them, and so caring for them, loving them, and fearful for them, and as a teacher, you want to be careful. I remember Saul Schoenbach, a bassoonist that I played with at Marlborough once. I talked about teaching. I didn't do any teaching. He says, "Oh, that's okay. Just remember that you're their teacher. They're not your father. You're not their father. You're not their mother, and you are not their job arranger or contractor or anything like that. You can't guarantee one iota what's going to happen to them. All you can do is be as the most honest and gentle and sincere and objective and listening with your heart that you can be. And then you go home.
Yeah, in fact, I know people who studied with him, and he was like that at the lesson. But one time there was a real emergency. The student's bassoon broke or something before a concert, and he called him up, and it was Wednesday night. He says, "I see you on Thursdays." And put down the phone, and that was that. So I guess it was a part of him that took that to heart. I don't know. I didn't know him, but so
I knew him. I enjoyed his we played a lot of Beethoven duets together for Marlborough, and he loved this lady who was a cooking expert who had a cooking class in outside of Marlborough before you get to is it Wilmington or something? Anyway, so and she would, but she had been a pianist at Juilliard, but her main gig was being a cook and a cookbook writer and everything like that. And so he cajoled her into having us come and play a duet or something for her cooking class in exchange for eating stuff that was made there. And I actually took some lessons from her, and I really enjoyed that mix of cooking and eating. And I ended up making a Linzer tort that became like probably the best part of my repertoire. Far better than some of the pieces that I played, and more in demand, I have to say too, and made money for not audiences, but for little auctions. I would play with an orchestra, and they say, and don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, at intermission, Mr. Stoltzman's auctioning off his Linzer tort, so contribute as much as you can.
So, having given master classes and stuff, where do you see and teaching and so forth? What general qualities do you see in young people, and where do you tend to take them in your teaching as a rule of thumb? Obviously, everyone's different.
Well, I'm not really a teacher. I'm not, and I've done very few master classes, and I've only, until maybe just a couple of years ago, I only had 2 students, which were at New England Conservatory, and I would have an occasional student come to me at the house, and we'd spend sort of like Cal would spend the whole day. I remember one guy, Tao Yang, who came all the way from China to study with me, and the only way he could do it was to enroll at the school, I guess. But then he decided that he could just come and see me at my house and pay me $2,000, and I just see him at the house. So I said, well, that's interesting. And so he did that for a few lessons, and he went back to China, and he's a professor at the conservatory in someplace in China, I think, in Beijing, maybe. Yeah, in Beijing. But he was a super guy, super nervous, and is too much aware of who he thought I was. And I wanted him to play a folk song or something like that, And then he revealed after a couple lessons that he had written a whole book of folk songs for his students. I said, so, what's this other stuff you're doing? And he said, well, I have to play a concerto next week. I said, well, but you're here in America. He said, no, I'm going back to play the concerto. And I said, what is it? He said, oh, it's just a piece that was written for me. He showed me the music. I said, this was like a real, contemporary concerto. He was going back, but he was hanging out with me. I don't know where else, but this was a kind of person I thought, wow, this guy's playing a clarinet. I want to play the clarinet. The kind of feeling, In fact, he named his kid after Cal. because he heard me talk about Cal so much, and there's turns out to be some kind of symbol for Cal or way of saying it that fits in Chinese language. But he was so, Tao, like he got an apartment in Boston. I said, well, you can come to so you have to take the train. It's 2 stops. You get off, you just walk up the hill and come down, and then I'm on a cul-de-sac. So he did that, but he did it 3 hours before the lesson. And I could see him out the window walking down the middle of the street. And, I said, Tao, it's too early, too early. He said, no, he didn't talk to me in English. He just, it's okay. When he came back, I said, do you know that you came like 3 hours early for the lesson? He said, well, I wanted to practice getting there so I would be on time when it was at the actual time. Okay. He's a mensch. He's a mensch.
Okay, Dick, one last question. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, life advice, clarinet advice, music advice for young people facing serious challenges right now?
Well, we can't do anything about that. Cal would just say this all the time. You say, you can't do anything about that. You can't do anything. No, you can't do it. What you can do is take the clarinet out of your case, stick it in your mouth, and play. That's what you can do. And that's all you can do. And maybe you have a little help from a friend or something, and they help you out a little bit, maybe like make a sandwich for you or something. But that's it. That's all you can do. You still want to be a clarinet player? It's okay. You don't have to be a clarinet player. I'm just telling you, this is all you can do. Okay? You're not going to save the world or anything. So you go ahead, have a nice life, and it was nice talking to you. And you sit there very like, do I really want to? First of all, do I really want to study with somebody who's sort of from the dark side? And also, do I really want to play the clarinet? It's true. I could do this. I could do that. I guess I'm just going to keep playing the clarinet. But with that, then, you play with you can only play with an ideal. You can't play for some kind of goal or some kind of contest or some kind of person or something. You play for yourself and for your teacher. And you and your teacher, that's where we are with the COVID coalition of cuckoos.
Fantastic. Well, this was a huge, library of fantastic stories. So thank you so much for sharing your, really colorful experiences and career and words of wisdom and observation, and talking about so many legends from Mel Torme to Opperman that aren't with us today that have been documented for history now. And so we wish you all the best, Nick, and thank you for getting up. I know this is a little bit earlier than you wanted to, but I appreciate it.
I can still go back to bed. It's not even noon yet.
That's true. So all the best. Thank you to Mika for all her help, and Lorenzo wherever he is, and everybody for tuning in. I mean, it was really good, and it was really easy interview for me, and I just listened and enjoyed it. So thank you.
The Japanese applaud thing at the end of something like a concert or a parties usually. Have you learned that?
Yeah. When I play in Japan, I guess I don't get much applause, unfortunately.
No, no, it's not for. It's mostly for parties.
Oh,
And
for parties, though. Okay.
And for good feelings that everybody feels together. They all feel it together, so they do it all together. But I don't think you got it. You want to try it with me? Here we go. Get your hands together. Ready?
Yeah. How's that?
Yeah, man. You got it. You got it. You're the man.
Ayako Oshima says yes. At the end, that's what they do. So fantastic. 3 equals 3 equals 9. Okay, I got it. See, I knew the math major in you would help there. So, Dick, thank you so much. Everyone have a fantastic night. Thanks for morning for some of you, Dave for some of you, and Dick, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to reconnect.
And please send me all your good reads.
Yeah, see you in about 5 years if I can find one. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.